Say after those State Department summits, I'd say we had frank and honest discussions. I think Melissa and Joe laid out the scale of the problem confronting the state of Connecticut. Joe laid out in some detail what we need to do to get our roads and bridges up to a state of good repair. Melissa pointed out that the Federal Department of Transportation is keeping an eye on us right now, and the warning lights on the dashboard. And we could be subject to some penalties if we don't get our roads and bridges up to a state of good repair. Melissa laid out in a lot of detail, which I think was agreed to by folks, everybody around the table, this is the amount of dough we need to, A, get our roads and bridges up to a state of good repair, and B, speed up our transportation system. You know, there was no dispute about that. But we did not agree on how to pay for the needed improvements to our transportation system. And I think there was an agreement that we're going to meet again. I think there was a sense that Joe and Melissa had given everybody an awful lot of information, and they wanted a little bit of time to digest it. But I'm not going to overstate. I mean, I would say there was quite a divide between us in terms of what we do, and I'm not sure that we found a toll bridge to connect us against that divide. And but I'm going to try my best. I mean, I've been doing deals a long time, and there's a lot of pent-up history in that room, and a lot of folks who are really skeptical about government being able to keep their word. And I'm going to try my heart out every day to give people a sense that we have a fresh start in this building, and I'm going to keep reaching out every day to Republicans as well as Democrats to see if we can get there. But as you know, and I've said many times, I'm going to make these folks make a decision going forward on how we fix our transportation system, because that, we agree, is in peril.
What's the timeline on these federal penalties with regard to your road improvements? What are you talking about?
Do you want to speak to that, Melissa, or Joe? Maybe you
I'll
that.
talk about it. What happens is, particularly on the highway side and on the both on the pavement and on the bridges, you have an audit that's done. We have to meet those audits, and we have to show that we're maintaining to the standards that are expected. So one of the problems that we have is that we looked at the funding going forward, and that was the good part of this discussion. There was no question as to the numbers that we were putting there and the reality of what we're facing. We're on a trajectory right now that we were staying at about 85%, okay, for state of good repair. As we looked forward at the next 10 years, we would drop by 40%. That leads to where the federal government has the ability to come in and first dictate how much money of what they give you is going to be spent specifically on those projects. Then if you can't meet that end of the criteria, they start penalizing you, where they'll reduce the amount of money that they'll give you and the percentage that you're going to get. Now, I want to be clear. We're not talking about that right at this moment. We're talking about the 10-year projections based on what we're seeing coming at us.
So you're saying in the future, in other words, if the state doesn't keep up standards in the future, in other words, no one's going to fine or penalize the state of Connecticut right now. But if things continue, to get worse or to be at the same level they are now?
Basically, the way that I would say it, and I'll turn this over to the secretary here, but what we're looking at in terms of funding coming in does not meet the need to keep us at the state of good repair that we need to maintain with the federal government. And that's the statement. So you are correct in saying it's not now. The problem is the projection going forward. And I'm talking about not a 20-year timeline. I'm talking over the next 10 years. Okay, what's going to be happening on this? Because, and I'm going to turn it over to you. Why don't you talk about the rate? The secretary has truly held me to a true diet on what is in front of us and what I have to look forward to in terms of this department.
That's great.
Talk about the rate of how
I have to commend Commissioner Giletti because his team presented to leadership research-based, data-based, condition assessment-based facts that support the level of investments that is required for a state of good repair. If you look at the budget that was passed by the General Assembly, you'll see that we're going to spend around $875 million in annual infrastructure investment in fiscal 2020. But the data shows that the annual required level of investment is $1.2 billion every year. So what Commissioner Gilletti is saying is if we cannot forge a path forward that allows this state to make that level of investment and his state of good repair continues to erode to the point at which it triggers penalties, the state of Connecticut will have some negative blowback from that. So again, the conversation today was to bring data and facts forward to help leadership understand the level of investment that's required on an annual basis to meet state of good repair, and what that financial pro forma looks like. And what it looks like is that to do that by 2030, we have an annual $1 billion deficit. And we respect that they made steps in the right direction to start to adjust that problem through the car sales tax transfer, but that only buys us 3 to 4 years, and the sea of red numbers will continue beyond that. And so this governor, again, is forging a conversation with leaders to say, let's begin to think now about that red path that is not going to go away, and let's avoid these penalties that we will be facing if we're not able to make the proper investments in our infrastructure.
Governor, you said that there was a gap. Is it between you and Senate Democrats, you and House Democrats? Is it Republicans? Where's the disconnect right now?
I think talking to my the Republican colleagues, there's just a sense that any money spent is money misspent by a government going back many years. And I'm trying my best to convince people this is the best investment we can make to get this state growing again. That money goes to transportation. That money can only go to transportation. And that's the most important thing we can do to grow jobs. But there is such severe skepticism about 20 years of history in this state that the money won't be well spent. That was a bridge too far.
But do you think that you can get Democratic votes on board after this meeting?
I think so.
What was the point of that income tax proposal that is included in your slide presentation? It seemed like a non sequitur. There was no context for it, so perhaps you could fill us in.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good idea myself. I mean, the theory is we're going to raise a significant amount of money through tolling to go just to transportation. I understand the middle class is getting squeezed in this state, and tolling is in many ways going to be costly to some folks. But let me just finish. So what we did was we put in place, and Melissa's modeled out a couple of ways that we can reduce the income tax for people earning up to about $125,000. We thought if I could reduce the income tax for those folks, plus a credit on the Easy Pass for working families, we could make this affordable, make this doable, and get us going.
That's because of the added cost of going to work. That's why that was
I understand people are getting squeezed, and I've got to do everything I can to show people that I understand that need. And I thought reducing the income tax and the credit would make an awful lot of sense as a way to mitigate that, and frankly help us get a legislature that doesn't like to make a lot of tough decisions to make a decision.
Like Melissa just said, if you need $1.2 billion annually, and congestion price tolling is going to get you, say, $800 million, can you really afford to compromise and scale back, like you said last week that you were willing to?
Look, we can figure out the right balance between what we do on state of good repair and what we do in terms of, for example, changing a couple of the exits down in Fairfield County that would shorten people's commute times by 22 minutes. I mean, we can figure out how we scale that out over a period of 10 years. I'm ready to negotiate. I've been trying to do deals a long time. This one's a tough one.
Was there any consensus that the Republicans or others in the room liked the idea of income tax reduction or tax credit? Or was that any kind of agreement on that, or how did they respond and receive that?
To be determined.
So
We'll talk again next week.
Governor, if you...
I don't want to overstate the optimism there, though.
What are the chances you think of having a special session? And if you say Democrats support it, why not call them in and have a vote?
I'm working with the leadership right now to figure out what's the right timing for that.
So you're still, how confident are you that there will be a special session on transportation funding and tolls?
Very confident.
Are you not taking the income tax off the table? Tell us exactly where you are on that. In other words, that was a proposal. You're not really pushing it forward at the moment. Am I correct? But are you not ruling it out? Like, where are you?
Oh, I'm certainly not ruling it out. I mean, as I said, I think it makes a certain amount of sense. I think it tells taxpayers across the state, I understand that your taxes have been going up. This year we had a budget where we held the line on income tax. Here's an opportunity for actually to reduce it a little bit. That doesn't happen in this state very often.
That's to help cut a deal for tolls.
That's a way to tell taxpayers, I understand that we take their dollars very seriously, and I'm going to show that we care.
But that wasn't made very clear, I mean, maybe you made it clear to them when you were talking about it, but the presentation here that we got on our phones and laptops, it was just sitting there. It didn't say that it was, this is a carrot to get you spoken with. That's what you're talking about, right?
No, what I'm talking about is the fact that I got to get a transportation bill passed. And we got to be able to pay for it. And I got a lot of people in this building that don't like to make tough decisions and certainly don't like to pay their bills. They love to borrow. They love to push it all off to the next generation. That's what we've done here for an awful long time. So this is one way I think I maybe can get some folks to the table and tell the taxpayers I get it.
So, Governor, if every penny that was supposed to go to the special transportation fund, including the new car sales tax, went to the special transportation fund instead of being diverted, would you have a $1 billion deficit in 2030?
We'd have a big $1 billion deficit very soon. The car tax does not solve that problem.
That's correct, and you have a copy of the presentation, and while without the continuation of the car sales tax, and by the way, by the end of the biennium it's at 25%, if it were not to go any further and get to 100%, we'd be facing about $1 billion by 2030. And if we were to continue it, which I believe was what the intention is, we'd still be facing about a $600 to $700 million annual deficit. So again, the point is, we can buy time, and that can be a part of the solution, but it doesn't fix the problem. And so you got a package of concepts that we put in front of legislative leaders to see if we can forge a path for agreement. And the income tax was one component of that.
One last question, Paz.
The state of good repair obviously is a very important thing, but the thing you hear from some legislators is, what are the enhancements? And this report has some examples, particularly in I-95 from Bridgeport to the state line. But does the administration intend to offer some more vivid examples of what your commute will look like in 10 years without tolls, and what it could look like, what the savings you can make in time if you do get it?
Yeah.
Or is this it? Is this the pitch you got, and this is what you're gonna should work off of for the next couple of years?
But I think people in that room there know exactly how transformative these investments could be. We went through in some detail, Joe's team did, in terms of what those two exits would mean in terms of I-95, which is a congested gridlock right now, and every real estate developer will tell you it's slowing down growth in that part of the state. Two exits, 6.2 miles would dramatically increase, 22 minutes?
22 minutes that we cut off.
We told that story in terms of what it does in Hartford, what it does in other parts of the state. To your point, yeah, I got to keep telling that story, and I got to do a better job of telling that story. And state of good repair, look, I come from a part of the state. I drove over the Mianus River Bridge a couple hours before it collapsed. And that's not going to happen in this state. It's not going to happen on our watch. I guarantee you that. But we got to be careful, and it's time to make those investments. Hey, thank you, everybody. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Governor.
No idea what you're talking about, so I have no,
Make that it's in his presentation.
that was not in the presentation we saw.
You didn't talk about any income tax or, you knew about the easy pass discount, but nothing on the table in there that said.
We didn't talk about any of numbers relative. It was suggestion out there, well, would we change your mind if we gave a tax reduction? Not necessarily, it was just out there as a tax reduction. But there was no numbers given, and the first I ever heard of 100,000 is whatever Mark said.
It would cut the gross. There was 23 or 21 slides from that presentation. Number 19 was the cut in the interest.
We didn't get through every single
We got-
slide because, time became an issue. And quite frankly, we were in there, almost 2 hours, and it wasn't, I think, maybe to the last half hour that there was even, the subject was brought up. Well, would you support tolls if this? Would you support tolls if that? The goal obviously was to support tolls. from their perspective, and they wanted to know what it is we would need to see to possibly get to that point, and they just mentioned a tax decrease, but not
So-
any parameters.
We got through slide 18, and I remember looking at slide 18 as the last slide.
Okay, 19 was the one that you showed.
Okay, we never got to slide 19, it ended.
We've set up, we didn't have any discussion on meetings next week, or did not agree or disagree to any meetings next week.
Nothing was scheduled.
We
It
said
was-
we would continue conversations on transportation.
What's your basic message right now after hearing some of this? Is there any way you guys support tolls in any form or fashion?
No, we don't support tolls, period. But let me just say this. They just threw out a lot of numbers very quickly, spoke very quickly, like the Federal Express guy, very fast. And for us to catch on to what they said, they started asking us, so where are you? Do you want tolls? Do you have a solution? It's like, well, can we digest the numbers just a little bit? Give us some time to take a look at, could we have the actual PowerPoint? But like you're saying on the slide 19, we got to 18. There was no mention of any figures whatsoever, no suggestion other than sort of off the cuff, could we change your mind what about if we will reduce taxes? Now, they did say that in a very broad sense. Now, I don't know if they're talking about gas tax, income tax. I don't know what taxes they were talking about. So I have no idea. Neither one of us have no idea what you're talking about.
And like I said, we were in there for almost 2 hours, and that part of the conversation wasn't even broached until the last half hour, and it was almost like, let's make a deal. Well, if we do this, would you support tolls? If you do that, would you support tolls? And I mean, from our perspective, besides the deluge of information, and a lot of it we knew and a lot of it we didn't, so we want to take a look at it. But there was nothing in this meeting at any point that would change our position on not supporting tolls. I guess that's the bottom line.
You concur with the numbers they put forward, that there will be a cap. You need about 1.2 billion to maintain the roads in the state of repair, and there's going to be a shortfall of about 400 million in the non-traditional.
So you need a big deep dive, Mark. And what I mean by that is, yes, they put those numbers, they're DOT, who am I to challenge? DOT engineers. Over what period of time are we talking to 1.2 billion? Over what period of time are we talking to 1.4, 1.9 billion? They put a lot of numbers out there, including railroad. Once again, you can't do infrastructure in the state of Connecticut like you're in California. The state of Connecticut is divided between east, west, north, south, with Hartford and New Haven being the central points. So you got to, where are you talking about these projects? How long are they going to be? When are they going to come online? It's like the wish list of DOT. So Representative Claris and I made it very clear. Let's look at your slides. We got to get our hands around it, and we will. Our people are very competent, both our staffs. We're going to look at these numbers. We're going to ask questions, and then we'll figure out. This is not an issue about tolls. It's an issue about transportation. They want to drive it to tolls, but Representative Claris and I are saying it's about transportation. That's the answer.
And they asked us when we left,
Right.
are you open to continuing conversations? And we both said, we are certainly open to continuing conversations on transportation, but based on your plans, they do not include tolls.
So if it's no tolls, no how, no way, why are we even in the room? I mean, isn't this
Well,
about
the
governor invited us into a
bridges
meeting,
on?
and we're always willing to listen.
Let's be clear. We were in that room because the governor couldn't get his toll vote through, period. They didn't ask us to have a meeting on the budget. They didn't ask us to have a meeting on paid family leave. They didn't ask us to have a meeting on minimum wage. And they didn't ask us to have a meeting on their single-payer system. We're in that room because he didn't have the votes. You all know, you were in this building up to the last day of session. The rumors flew that they're going to put it up on a board on Monday, then Tuesday in the House. Representative Claris knew those votes. He knew that wasn't going to go forward. So let's be clear. We were in that room because they don't have the votes. He had a pair of deuces. He showed that he had deuces, and that's where we are. We're in that room because he needs our help to get tolls over the finish line, because he knows that most of the legislators in this building know that the tolls are not the answer, because government can't be trusted, that they're not going to continually take that money and use it for other things. I don't mean toll money, but the other SDF money. Just like we saw the original budget proposal changing the new car tax. That's the problem.
And you look at what we just came up of a week and a half ago, we voted on a budget. In that budget that we did not support, were we ever in that room having that conversation? We were in that room one time the day before the budget just to give the brief briefing that our staff gets. the day before the budget's going to be done. I mean, this isn't about hurt feelings. This isn't about resentment. This is about the reality that 2 years ago, we did a bipartisan budget in this state. And was it perfect? No, because there's no such document that exists. But we believe, Senator Fasano and I think the Speaker and the Majority Leader and the Senate President would all agree that that was the best, one of the best budgets we've put together, because everybody sat down and everybody had parts of it that moved it forward. Now, we also all know that the only reason that happened is because the tie in the Senate and the 4-vote difference in the House. But that was the best for the state of Connecticut. Now this year, because they have more votes and more members, they jammed through every bill they want, and we never sat in that room and had a conversation about anything. Now it's almost July, and we just want to work together. They don't want to work together. They want to get what they want, and they can't do it on their own for the one thing this year. And marijuana, which they couldn't pass either, their answer to that is, well, you know what? We think the people should decide. No, because if they had the votes to pass that, they would have done that too.
You mentioned trust. The governor also mentioned how important that is to you. So Connecticut has a lot of boxes, volatility cap and spending cap. Is there any way to resolve what you just described as the trust issue? To trust the state of Connecticut not to misuse the money, whatever it comes from.
Well, I'll just give you a hypothetical, right? Let's say, in a hypothetical situation, that somebody, a legislator said, I would agree to support tolls if, in fact, you agreed to lower the income tax, okay? Just as one example. And that was written in a budget, that was written in statute. We all know that every year we can change anything we want in any part of this, in the budget and the statutes. So that would not give a legislator and their constituents any sense of trust or comfort that that would actually happen. So for me, that trade-off is not a real trade-off. It's not fair, because we know as a legislature and as a governor, things can change on a daily basis.
Where do you put the chances of even having a vote on this summer?
I don't know.
I couldn't say, because I don't know what their numbers actually are.
What I don't understand.
There's a gap with you guys, but not with the Democrats. And I asked him, well, if the Democrats are on the board, call them in.
Right, exactly. That's what we said too. And that's why we're in there, because they don't have those.
What else did you talk about for the other 90 minutes? Although we're all very interested.
There was a lot of repetitions. No?
Well, we had a
mostly talked
PowerPoint
about the tolls.
presentation that took almost 45 minutes and a half.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Okay, so you had the power presentation, then you had a discussion.
Right, then
Yes.
Senator Looney had to leave early.
Yeah.
And Senator Duff left with Senator Looney. And then we started having dialogue of where, and we made it clear that, look, we made it clear that the reason why we believe we were here was because you don't have the votes, and you didn't include us in the other items that Representative Claridge mentioned.
And they said, well, that doesn't matter because we're here now. And our response was very simple. The most important thing, they think this is the most important issue we have to address in the state. And we said we would argue the most important issue that has to be addressed is the state budget, which we had no input in, you had no interest in, which just passed, a week or two ago. And so it's just the disingenuousness. Do I believe they want us in that room to have this conversation? Yes, but I believe they want us because they don't have the votes on their own. And it's also my understanding, Senator Fasano can answer more thoroughly on this, that the Senate Democrats don't have an interest in calling a tolls bill unless it's bipartisan.
Is it your
What do you think?
Well, I think that they don't want a partisan vote. I think that they're concerned about that. That's just what I hear.
Do you agree on the sense of urgency?
No, they said, I think they might have said to you $850 million is being put into. Well, it's $850 million of state money and $750 million of federal money. That's $1.6 billion of infrastructure money, which is more money that we've put into it prior to the bipartisan budget. So there's more money than I think what was stated to you.
Yours was more than 25%, right? That's what theirs was. And yours was to phase in almost 100% over time.
Say that again, Susan.
You wanted, the bipartisan agreement had more money from the special transportation fund going in transportation. This slide is only 25%.
Yes, yes. I mean, what they showed here on this slide, I don't know if they showed our analysis, so I don't want to speak to that. And they went so fast through these slides, it was like click, click, click. It was like watching a football film. It was just really quick.
So I think the answer is, Susan, that we all agree that it's a very important issue and something we have to address, but I don't think the issue needs to be addressed tomorrow. I think that the amount of money in it is sufficient for the time being, but it's a long-term issue.
So, they said that the state risks losing money in the federal match if they don't meet certain audit requirements on the state of those bridges. Do you think that they said that that's something that would be around 10 years from now, maybe a little bit farther out than that? Is that something that needs to be addressed now, or do you just wait on that as well?
So what was left was that we've kind of completed that to the fiscal year 2021.
Yep.
So it'd have to be addressed soon, but relative to the fiscal year 2021, that's still 2 years from now, if I may. So I think it can be addressed. As long as the federal government sees what you're doing and you're moving forward, they don't want you to be stagnant and get behind. And the penalty is, essentially, they're going to earmark where your money goes. So, it has to be addressed, just like we believe transportation has to be addressed. The question is, how? And, we've given alternative. They don't agree with it. We're going to go through their numbers they gave us, and we'll take another look.
Was there any progress in this meeting at all? Was the ball moved forward 1 inch towards toll?
Towards tolls?
Not from our perspective.
Not
no.
from our perspective.
No. Thank you.
Thank you.